Welcome to the Up Arrow podcast with William Harris, featuring top business leaders sharing strategies and resources to get to the next level. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey everyone, I'm William Harris. I'm the founder and CEO of Element and the host of the Up Arrow podcast, where I feature the best minds in e-commerce to help you scale from 10 million to 100 million and beyond as you up arrow your business and your personal life. Today's guest is an Emmy Award-winning executive producer, a creative force behind some of the boldest branded storytelling on the internet, and the founder of the Aux Co. Dani Dufresne started out as a theater kid with a camcorder. She's now one of the sharpest voices in advertising and content, known for building high-impact creative teams, pushing clients past their comfort zones, and producing stories that don't just look good, they work. She's worked with brands like Bose, Marriott, Nike, blending community, culture, and conversion into experiences that feel less like ads and more like movements. Today we're talking about what makes great branded content actually convert, why most creative work dies before it lives, and how to lead teams that build magic without the bloat. We'll also talk about chasing Emmys, wrangling Ice Cube, and why the next great frontier for storytelling might be powered by AI, but still led by heart. If you've ever tried to make content that doesn't just win awards, but wins attention, wins trust, and wins hearts, this one's for you. Dani Dufresne, welcome to the Up Arrow podcast.
Hello, I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited also. I want to announce to Melinda Jackson. Thank you, Melinda Jackson, for putting us in touch. I always love it when people find really good guests to be on the show. And so thank you, Melinda.
Thank you.
The last quick interruption before we get into the really good stuff is the sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Element. Element is an award-winning advertising agency optimizing e-commerce campaigns around profit. In fact, we've helped 13 of our customers get acquired, with the largest one selling for nearly $800 million and one that IPO'd. You can learn more on our website at element.com, which is spelled ELUMYNT.com. That said, on to the good stuff. Okay, Dani, you once told me that if YouTube owns TV, why not make a documentary? So let's start there. What's broken in the way most brands think about video, and how do you flip that?
I think that what used to be really clear as far as where their audience would be, how to reach them, the more that social has grown, the more blurred that has become. Every brand's marketing budgets are really just having to get diffused and filtered through all of these various buckets. And it feels like they can't tell the same brand message across the board in all of those places. And so they end up sort of putting money more where they think it's going to get them return. But in the long run, it ends up actually like diluting their brand audience and their community with the buyer and the consumers. So I'm hoping that we'll kind of be able to go back now to storytelling, like really creating content that your consumers want to sit with. They're going to choose to sit there and watch it for more than 2 minutes. It doesn't have to have logos everywhere and co-branding everywhere. It's just telling stories that they want to hear, or it's even in a lot of cases getting them off of their phone and out of their house, living the life that your brand stands for. I mean, that's a great way to build community there.
Mm-hmm. I love to tell people whenever somebody asks me, how long should my ad be, right? 15 seconds, 6 seconds, 30 seconds. And I'm like, make it 2 hours if it's good. The example that I give is like the Lego movie and even the Barbie movie, right? Where it's like, these are advertisements to a point, but they're advertisements that we're willing to pay for and go and sit and watch for an hour and a half, 2 hours, because we genuinely enjoy the content. And to your point, there isn't a length of an ad if you're able to tell a story and capture the attention.
Exactly. I also think the same applies to, I need to see the logo in the first 5 seconds. Or like, of course, if you ask people, can you tell what this is? Or like, they're going to have an opinion about that. But I think the best content, I don't know if you saw the most recent Adidas Oasis content out of Adidas UK.
I didn't. No.
This video, it's gorgeous for one, and it's like concert video, and it's just very 90s and early aughts Oasis. And you don't even they don't show the Adidas brand at all. You never see the full logo on anything. You just see little glimmers of stripes, like in shadow, and it's enough to where you're hooked. You want to and it's the fact that they're not over serving it. I think that's the problem. We've gotten to where brands are trying everything instead, because they are like a little bit scared to try the stuff that might take longer, but work out better in the long run. And so they want to do this low hanging fruit of just throwing stuff. Oh, we know they'll click it. We know they'll click it. Okay. But when you're creating content built for a flashy, trendy audience, then they will move on to the next flashy, trendy thing after your product, and they won't stick around, and you're not helping them build that community that they want.
Yeah. Building the community is key. I want to pull back a little bit because I think this helps to start tying in where we're going to go with this. You've told me that you started off as a theater kid. You moved into Emmy Award-winning producer to founder. What kind of ties in all of those chapters?
I love entertainment. I fell in love with movies, very old Hollywood movies and theater as a little girl, and was obsessed with the Rat Pack and Gone with the Wind and just everything old Hollywood. And when I went to film school, I was sort of taken aback by, I'm not one to sit in a theater and watch a silent film that's just, Fellini's eye getting razor bladed, like the classic stuff you learn in film school, because it's artistic. There's reasons why parts of it are entertaining and parts aren't. I'm drawn to stuff that entertains and touches you, whether it's the highest form of the argument or not. It doesn't have to be super complicated to do that. And I think what I fell in love with in film school was the idea of storytelling and breaking it down to its individual elements, being able to tell a story in a single frame or a single image, and everything else is built around that. If you can't take like the bulk of your idea and put it in one image, then you don't really have an idea that's strong.
Boy, that's difficult to do. I mean, there's a book that I've read, and I'm going to draw a blank on the exact name, but it's something like A Swim in the Rain in the Pond, but it's a breakdown of short stories. And what I really appreciate that is there's people who are really good at writing short stories try to figure out how they can write the absolute shortest story possible. And I think to your point where it's like, how can you distill this idea into the simplest visual possible? If you can do that, then you've got something. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, you can build around it. I mean, it's the same as the old adage that there's only 27 stories that can ever be told, and everything is just an iteration of those stories. Sure. Pretty Woman is just a version of Cinderella, and there's, Fish Out of Water and all of the various. You're not reinventing human existence and storytelling. Sure. You're just using small pieces of a puzzle like you would in a play or a single frame of film, and looking at it, I can tell what the mood is. I can tell, is it a happy movie? Is it a sad movie? What is the person in it feeling? What should I be feeling? And all of that, when you have creatives that can tap into that and then are able to expand into it, it hooks the audience that much more. And I think that there's, really good storytellers in advertising. It's just now I think we've gotten away from that being the most important thing. And I think we're going back to it. I think at the end of the day, like you have no long-term brand if you don't have an audience that knows your brand story or connects to your brand, knows what it stands for. And I think that plays a part. You can do it, just with audio. You can do it visually. You can do it with moving objects. And I love that idea of it. And quickly, when I moved into having a job in the commercial world and advertising, I didn't even think of that as an option around filmmaking. And it just clicked with me. I thought really, like, a lot of people would say, oh, you're selling out. It's consumerism. No, I think there's a way to make it be both. I think there's a way to entertain people and sell your products at the same time.
Philip Jackson runs Future Commerce, and one of the phrases that he repeats over and over again is commerce is culture. And I love it. And I never thought about it that way. But if you go back even thousands of years, it's like a lot of culture was defined by the commerce that we had, right? And so to your point, that is one of the more important aspects of the culture that we have, is the commerce that we're encouraging, discouraging, influencing in some way.
Yeah, and even I think the rise of influencers is all based around community, right? People connect to someone online, and it's not that they're all about that influencer. It's about this community of people they're all watching that person with. And I think we have had a lot of brands with the ability for anything to be possible comes a lot of shit thrown in every single direction, right? To see what works. And I think that you could do that to a certain extent, but at some point you have to commit to your long-term strategy of your brand and be willing to go the long haul, because it's worth it in the end, but it does take a little bit longer. Like, think about it that way, to your point. If why the brands that are going to come and go are the ones that are taking what the world is doing and being just trying to be a part of that versus making the conversation and, standing for something and being there with them, but like pushing them in a new way. Like, you don't have to be the same as everyone else, or you're just going to get, you're going to fade into the background.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It just becomes vanilla in the world of a lot of other possibilities. So what problem were you solving for starting the Aux Co? What made you say, this is the problem that we need to solve?
Once I was on the advertising side for a while and at larger holding company agencies, I was realizing that the focus was going away from the creative bar and making really quality work to the P&L, to what can we do in-house, to, getting things to be cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, which I understand is that, with the invention of new technology, we can make things cheaper, but it was really more at the detriment to creative. And so I was feeling like, where are all of the independent creatives going? Because they're not allowed to really flourish at most agencies because most things they're getting are a no, or this the other agency does that, or that's going to, eat up too much money, or we don't want to pitch that. And we're sort of seeing these agencies pop up that they wanted to keep their overhead low to avoid that problem, right? We have all these holding companies merging to become the monster of advertising agencies, but their revenue is still dropping. And they're having the places where they are cutting the most cost are creative, the time it takes to develop something, cost it takes to produce something themselves. And they're going for, again, the easy, like low hanging fruit that they can point back to some data point that they've also sold their clients. So I kind of wanted to get out of that. And, as I saw these new agencies pop up, I thought that was perfect. What they need is a EP that can bring them everything that they don't need full-time services for. So they can, every idea that they have, they know who to call and say, how do I build this or make this, or what other ways can we do this? And really empowering them to be able to have those bold ideas for the clients.
Yeah, that's so important. There's so many things that I feel like just get watered down without having someone like that in your corner. Something that I heard you say before that's kind of stuck with me was, you don't need to know what you want your business to be, but you need to know what you want it to not be. And I might have butchered the quote, but it was something to that effect. And I love that. Like, so what were your big no's? What were the things you're like, this is a no?
When I knew I wanted to leave the agency, I was at Weber Shandwick at the time. When I knew I wanted to leave, I knew I did not want to be a freelance producer, and I knew I did not want to be a production company. The problems there being, when you're freelance, you're just sort of bouncing around from office to office. They pay you to sit in a corner. They pay your full rate to just sit there and really maybe use 20 to 30% of you. And you don't get to be a part of the creative development or really bring much to the table other than just doing what they say. And on the production company side, I had been on that side for a while with post and production, and I love production companies, but I find that the best production companies are those that have a strong point of view or a niche, or we do sports really well, or we do cars really well. And I did not want to constantly be doing the same thing. I did not want to have a roster of directors who I was trying to sell them more than sell a service. I wanted to be able to give what I loved so much about agency life was being able to give whatever the craziest idea. Let's build a Double Dare style set, like of food to have during a live halftime show for Tums, and great, awesome. Whereas normally when you're a production company, you can only do the stuff that you know how to do. So you're going to sell that stuff. You're going to sell things. Things are going to all look the way that you do stuff. You're not going to take every new project and brief from a new approach, which is what I loved so much about being at agencies. So I've just really applied that to my company as it's grown, because I've seen that's been the number one service that, everyone kind of needs. It's not only the production operations of how much does this cost, how long will it take, but also how can we approach this that maybe we haven't thought about? Is a video the best version of this? Or should we do an event? Or what kind of media should we look at? And because I've been involved in all of that, I'm able to bring that production point of view with those items earlier on in the process versus, a lot of agencies are used to ideating something, selling it in, and then just sort of saying, here, production company, we'll hire you, you make this. And at that point, there's not a lot that can be done or changed. It may still not be the best version of it because there's no one on your in-house team that's going to be like, I don't know if that works. They're just going to kind of go with it. And the production company is going to have their own point of view of how they want to execute it. And they may not know yours and have your, same vision. I think what was the most interesting was that as I was at agencies, the amount of time I had to spend training creatives, like younger creatives, on how to translate a creative idea into like production. Because that's just not something that's taught at a lot of the design schools.
Sure.
And if you think about it as this huge game of telephone, and production sits at the bottom of, at the end, just because it's so clear to you in your head what it is does not mean it's clear to everyone else.
Sure. Yeah,
and you may have an idea that's completely different than the client's. And so a lot of what I found myself doing as an agency producer and still do is translating in between the two groups, or sometimes three when you add in clients, and making sure that everyone is just crystal clear on what the idea is and problem solving. And I think as a more fractional EP across all the kinds of production, that allows me to do that and work with really inspiring creatives too, that I'm just very lucky to be able to work with.
It feels like to me you're saying something that resonates with me, at least, which is you want to create art, right? Like you want this to be something that's a masterpiece, not just a giclée. I think about Rembrandt versus Andy Warhol, and like geniuses, both very artistic. But it's like maybe the production house, typically, like you said, they're getting to a point where they're like, hey, well, we can do this same 4-color, thing here that we did with Madonna. We could do this with Elvis. And you're like, no, I don't want something that's exactly like or similar to something else. You're like, I want something that's completely out of the box, completely new, that's just us. And that's what you're able to like fill in a gap for.
Yeah. It's also a matter of, having everyone's best interest and being able to sell them on the best way about that isn't what they're saying they want, right? So we need the logo here, or this wording has to be here, or whatever, right? That the client's going to want, that I know the creatives don't want. And then if you ask the production company, they want the most amount of art and the least amount of, rightly so. Everyone wants it to be beautiful. Everyone just has a different opinion of how to get it there. And I think the more that you can educate your clients, the brands, everyone across the board about how production works, and just reiterate, like, you don't need to overserve. And then the more trust there is, that the better work that gets created. And I think that takes a lot of time. And it takes sort of speaking multiple languages, knowing like, well, I know that what you're asking me for is this, but the reason you want it is that. So what is another solution where everyone wins, but it's not this, way that you want to go about it that's gonna maybe like diminish the creative or not make it as, what everyone wants it to be. It's a lot of that.
Along those lines, then let's talk about like how the best work actually gets done. What's the biggest reason why branded content fails? Like, and how do you do it differently?
Unfortunately, I feel at least that one of the biggest reasons that branded content fails is not having the media strategy as closely tied to the creative development and having pieces there really integrated. Because the number one, it's not just a matter of what they're going to be seeing on a screen. It's what screen are they seeing it on? How are they interacting with it? Are there also placements in these places that we could make custom and really make pop because of that? Versus waiting to the last minute and just, we'll just stick it everywhere that we normally do. And at that point, creative can't change anything. Creative can't, come up with interesting things. I mean, I've done billboards where we have changed the billboard every few days because we've pretended that bites were being taken out of it, with like photo perfect imagery. And then, this very similarly on phones, it looked like a bite was being taken out and your phone was being cracked. or, you're using out of home media in a very timed way to where it's breaking out of the noise. And I think people are used to just swipe this away, swipe this away, swipe this away. And the goal is to get them to stop and pay attention. And I think that unfortunately that is a place that I don't see a lot of integration. I'm typically trying to bring people on early. I do think that with good branded content, especially longer form or series, working with, editorial partnerships, press partnerships, looking at, or just audience brand partnerships in general. I think that the more and more it becomes, I'm this kind of lifestyle brand, and so is this brand. What can we do together? Which in reality is no different than when you're giving an influencer $200,000, but you're getting a lot more for it, in my opinion, in the long run. And, I think a lot of these more interesting creative agencies that are popping up, these smaller agencies, are coming to the table with those sort of ideas, like, things that aren't a one-off 6-month thing, things that take years to develop. And I think not being afraid of that. And also letting all the messaging sort of come together. It's not just this department came up with this idea and then nothing feels cohesive or matches at all. And that's part of like focusing more on a short term versus really like allowing yourself to build out a long-term strategy.
Yeah. It makes a difference when things feel like they were done with intent and that they were done together. What about data? Like, where does data fall into this when you think about, let's just say, a lot of what we do on the performance side, because that's where I run, right? I run on the performance side. Everything is data. Data almost is the only thing that we look at, and we sometimes get sidetracked by small iterative changes instead of focusing on bigger storytelling things. There's a balance there, though, right? And so, like, how much can data play into the brand side versus how much do you have to say, nope, shut up, we're not going to look at that data for right now because this is what we need to do? Like, where do you find that balance?
I like to have this practice. It's common within documentary filmmaking, but it can be done with anything, where you can tell the same story, both sides, with the same exact imagery and the same exact everything. You could do a lot of the ways you could do that with data too. I think that it's not that data. I think that the more that you scrutinize data, the more that you can read anything you want into it, right? And I have a more like, that's something that why I wish media was more of a part of the creative development strategy, and why when it is integrated with larger editorial partnerships or PR partnerships, it does become its own bigger thing and it's a more successful campaign. But I think it's because you have people in the long run, they're taking clicks and interpreting in that everything they know about a person, and that's not possible. And, a like or a save costs someone nothing. Like, that is not a huge indicator of if someone's going to buy that product. And I think I think that if the two groups could work together more to help each other understand why those sides are important, I think that data is super important when it comes to how an audience is viewing something, how they're experiencing it. What key messaging do they really like? That doesn't mean they need to hear that exact sentence all the time. Sometimes it means maybe they need to hear a different sentence. I think that that's where you have people hop from rebranding agency to strategy agency to this, to this, to this. And there's just no cohesion because everyone has their own point of view.
Sure. I had Preston Rutherford on here, who was one of the founders and CMO of Chubby's Shorts. And
I love those.
Yeah, so do I, right? Like, I got an early pair, I want to say back in 2013, and they were still pretty young at the time. And one of the things he talks about is how brand marketing actually should be performative. That a lot of times, companies go into it with this wrong mindset, as it's a big cost and they're not sure if they're going to be able to measure it. And it's like, to a point, there should be ways that you can measure this in some way to say, this definitively was better for your brand. This is better for the company. What are ways that you're looking at that when you run something to be able to say, if somebody's like, hey, we're ready to do this, but we don't know if we could justify the cost, how do they get around that?
Typically, if that's a response I'm getting, it's because, well, It's from one small section of the brand marketing team that has one small goal, right? Like, we want to roll out this particular sponsorship or partnership with Starbucks or whatever it is, right? It's a very small ask. The issue is they have all of these other channels talking other things and noise that's overlapping it, that it's more of a, yeah, your budget for this small thing may be nothing, but how can we look at everything you have and integrate this in better ways? Maybe, like, it's not necessarily that agencies or production companies need to figure out ways to make things cheaper. It's that I think that where these people come up with these marketing budgets is not based in any sort of reality. And there's not anyone on that side saying, well, if this isn't this initiative's budget and this initiative's budget, let's see where we can, have cohesion. Let's see where these can come together. Maybe, are there better ways to use this money? And I do a lot of that, like breaking down,
Sure.
Because it's like, it's not worth doing if you're not going to make sure it's reaching your audience. You're just throwing this money. I'd rather you give it to some other campaign, like do something else with it. And I think that when you are a brand manager in-house, like a lot of what you're doing is just checking a box, right? Like, yes, I did this thing and I could point to this thing that says it did all right. And so they want to go after the stuff where there is data that points exactly to how it well and is better to track. But at the same time, that is the stuff that doesn't tell the biggest picture, tells the most story. So I think we have a lot of that kind of budget happening where the idea of what things cost is not accurate. And then the divvying it up between things is not very accurate. I mean, in the long run, I do not personally think that giving an influencer $1 million is worth what you're going to get back from that. Very, very, very rarely. At this point, they can make their own brand, making whatever you make, and go do it themselves. You know who would
Some of them are.
Yeah. But what could you do with that $1 million to better engage the audience that you already have and build it? Like a lot more.
That. Yeah. It reminds me, I always think a lot of in terms of relationships, human relationships. And the biggest one that I could think of is my marriage to my wife. And so that's one that I reference a lot because I feel like a lot of people can relate to those types of things. But if it just comes down to data that you can measure, it's like saying like, yep, we went on a date night, check, kiss my wife, good morning, check, right? And it's like, that's not very romantic. That's not going to lead towards truly a good marriage in the same way that's like, hey, I've got my checklist. I did it. We needed to do brand, check. I did that. Okay. I reached X amount of people, check, versus actually doing something that's going to sweep them off their feet and make them say, wow. And you might not always be able to say, here's the ROI on that, but there's more of a gut feeling. And I think that's something that's missed sometimes when we're looking too closely at performance.
It's all about the tried and true rule of like, is it remarkable? Marketing is just making things that are remarkable. And that doesn't have to be being brand new. That doesn't have to be being something no one else is. It's just showcasing how you are remarkable and how the people that use your product are remarkable, and tell that story over and over again in a million different ways, in a way that people want to watch and engage with. They will be, a customer for life.
You hinted at this with influencers, and so I kind of run with this a little bit, but you talked about how influencers can just go create their own brand, and a lot of them have. Mr. Beast has done it, right? A lot of people have done this. But I want to talk about this idea of building slow versus burning fast. A lot of new brands obsess over going viral, but you've actually seen how it can destroy a brand. Why do you think depth is more important than reach?
It's about building long-term trust and viability and a stronger audience. Like I said earlier, I think if you're going just for flashy, trendy, poppy, then they're going to leave you just as soon as somebody else can copy what you're doing. Most of what you're buying on TikTok Shop is, dupes of the same thing. You don't even know if that's what you're really buying. That should not be your goal. Marketing is the most important marketing you can do is get people to tell other people about your product, not as you being the one doing it. And I think that the best way to guarantee that is by building strong, stronger and slower with consumers that feel like they've discovered you. Oh my gosh, no one's heard of this. And I love it. It works so great. This is the story about them. I mean, Vera Bradley, right? You have two older women with all of these patterns, and it was very like interesting. They have a really amazing history and story. That's a cool story to tell. Or Bombas with, the way they give back. Even, to the point I'm sure that Chubby's has a really good story, but but every time you see an image from that brand, every time you see a piece of content from them, it's telling. You can tell who the brand is. You can tell right away where it's coming from because they've taken that time to build that strong audience and to connect to them. Of course, there's ways that you can be engaged in the current day-to-day news and conversation. And I think that's ways that you can use your, Twitter, X or whatnot very well and right. Be, doing those things and stunts. But I think in the long run, it's all about putting your product in people's hands or service or whatever with people to where they love it so much they are telling all of their friends. That is and that's community, which only happens when it is the longer sell. And I think that there's a lot of people that start companies and they are just trying to think about, they have a 5-year plan of selling it.
Yeah.
And
speaking
sure, but
dupes,
I'm not a fan of that.
No, neither am I.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of dupes, have you seen what's going on with Lululemon and Costco? Apparently Costco has stuff that is so remarkably close to Lululemon that Lululemon is suing them. It's absolutely wild. And it's like $100 versus $10. And everybody's like, this is actually a really big win for Costco. This isn't working out very favor for Lululemon, but it's also, I don't know a lot of women that shop at Lululemon that are also like making sure that they can divert to the clothing section of Costco. So why not let them have why not use it as a partnership and say, oh, let's do a pop-up with let's do a product partnership with Costco. Like that makes more sense. That's a great idea.
Because a lot of women in Costco are wearing yoga pants.
Sure. Very true. I want to go back to this idea though of burning fast, building slower, burning fast. You brought up some good points that I like. Prime Energy drink is one that I feel like we saw they built fast and it crashed for them and it didn't work out the way that they would have liked to. I always compare this to the idea of cancer cells. Cancer cells grow remarkably fast, but it's not healthy, and we see how it ends up becoming rejected and things like that. And I'd say that the similar thing happens to companies where, to your point, there's a significant growth point of resiliency where you're building off of really good, strong, loyal customer base that can continue to sustain, and that ends up accelerating even more down the line versus this quick burn, on a TikTok viral sensation at first.
I think a lot of it comes down to ego, right? I think to be a good marketer, to be a brand that's willing to go the distance, it can't be desperation to sell yourself because you have no confidence in yourself that you're going to be there, right? It's knowing that you don't have anything to prove because you are the best whatever product it is that you make, and you're going to stick it out and go the long run for that. Yeah. The big flashy is, we need to prove and sell. And a lot of times that involves big viral flashy things, but also telling a bunch of different versions of your brand story to see what sticks, to the point where everyone ends up very confused. And you don't have, in the long run, you've spent more time trying to know what everyone wants to hear from you and wants you to be, that you there's no substance once people actually get in, and so they leave. And the community, the brand, the audience, whatever. And I think that's a strategy if all you want to do is play a business the way that you would play the stock market, right? And I just want to get GameStop up really high so everyone will buy it from me. If I just want to sell something, prove I have an audience and then sell it like crypto, then cool, you can do that. It's just that is not brand building.
So what are the tips for building community instead of just an audience?
Community is people to people, right? So you can take it as far back as Tupperware parties if you really want to be. I mean, that is a entity of how marketing started. getting out there with the people, partnering with local organizations or parks or whatever it is where your audience hangs out, and help them be a part of the lifestyle that you represent. I think that's a huge way to do it, and it be in all the places where they are, whether that's, Reddit or Substack. And of course, everyone's on Instagram and TikTok, but at this point, like, that doesn't make you interesting. And I think,
Sure.
You have to either be where everyone else is, but be there like in a different way, or go be, where your audience is and no one else is, right? Like, I think that's how, it's no different than when people started selling advertising on podcasts. No one was doing that for a while, and there's an audience there now. And I think all of these things, and even the engagement numbers going so far down in social this year, I think is from this drive that people want to be in communities. People want to meet like-minded people. You're seeing like all of these women's groups, and there's like the New York Dad Club, and all of these cool things start up because we just miss connection, especially after the last like 4 years. And that is, it's a longer, harder sell, and it takes a long-term plan that you can't like get halfway through and bail on. You have to commit to the whole plan, and know that it will that there will be follow through. Like I see this happen so long where of course it takes more than 1 quarter for a good strategy to work. You can't abandon it just because, there's 1 quarter that it's not clicking yet. You can turn little things here and there if you need to, but you don't have enough data to learn what you needed to learn from it. Also, you haven't given it time. The stronger stories like take the longer time to build. It's kind of when there's a really good show out there that everyone's like obsessed with all of a sudden, and you start watching it thinking everyone says this is the best, and like they're like, oh, but like the 6th episode is where it gets like really good.
Sure.
And then you just have to stick with it. And I think that's all just a part of storytelling and community, and like the long-term strategies that I think have been abandoned versus this video will have a new strategy, and then this campaign will have a new that's not creating any kind of cohesion. And I think there's brands that have been around a long time and can do that, where they can play because everyone's going to buy Coca-Cola or whatever, no matter what, versus these up and coming brands who see that and thinks that it's the way to go. Like they think that's the only option.
You have to basically have conviction that this is the story, go after it, and know that you'll see the data, but it's going to take a lot longer than your quarterly reports are going to show.
Yeah, it comes down to not making decisions out of fear, and like it's the same as like dating or anything else, right? People can sense desperation, and a lot of that comes off very desperate, and it's off-putting, and it might, just because you get one viral thing. I mean, if you have to spend, or if you have to get 2 million views to make $200, then you have a bad strategy.
Yeah. What's the danger of optimizing too soon then? So whether it's messaging or media, like if we get into this kind of leading towards what you're saying, is the danger, and maybe I'm going to put this in here, what I hear, the danger is that confusion. So you've changed it and now nobody knows what it is. And so you only have so much opportunity to share in somebody's mind. Is that the biggest danger?
Yeah. And also I think like you're going to have your overall audience, right? The overall people that you're marketing to, and then you're going to have subcategories of that, and treating all of not taking the time to figure out what the subcategories are to communicate to them properly, and just taking one full on and then alienating the others. That is a lot of what happens when you're in there turning knobs too much, like flipping through the channels too fast just because you think there's a commercial. Like you have to have the patience to see what's working, see what's not, but also like listen to your audience and, be part of the conversation, be part of, get the product in their hands, hear what's wrong, what they like or don't like about it, and expand your mind a little bit. I think that's why ego can't be a part of it.
Sure. Yeah. We always talk about the hippo, the highest paid person in office. And it's like, you have to ignore the hippo sometimes, right? Because they've got their own idea, but more often than not, that person is no longer the ideal customer. And so you kind of have to go back.
Or that person is also the creative director and the brand owner, and they want to change the logo right at the very last second before it goes out to packaging because they don't like what you've done. Like this is going to happen because just as with the same as like your in-house team is not always the best people to do the work for you. Like you need to be able to like see outside of yourself. And I think the only like ego has to be taken out of the way, even with creatives, I think like sometimes, with ego and with ideas. Because at the end, none of it is about anything other than what the brand stands for. And that has nothing to do with any one person.
Let's talk about what's broke with creative today. Mm-hmm. Specifically, like what's killing good creative?
There is no lack of creative.
Sure.
Time. I would say time, this idea that just because something is possible in a week, just because it's possible to hire some influencers and get some content made and messaging, that does not mean that it should be done that way. If we're not taking the time it takes time to make that long-term strategy. How does this lead up to that? Obviously there's, stunt and fun stuff you can do, in real time, but I think it's making sure that everything isn't going true north because they're changing agencies, they're changing strategies all the time. Mm-hmm. And you have these huge creative agencies that, they have their teams are too big to move quickly. So the bigger ideas instantly get put to the back, instantly your nose, because that's really going to take too long to do anything with, and you have, very, very high up creatives, and very, very low creatives and no one in between, just that. Sure. There's not a lot of training and culture about how to get the process going. So, you have the expectation of, we just say yes to everything the client asks us for, whether it's the best version of the idea or not. And these, I can plug in this media thing or this influencer buy and kind of just give them what they want. And it's very little in creative hours of billing. It's very little of my time. And it's going to, check off the box. And I think coming up with creative ideas, or even brands being okay with working with teams that push back on what they're asking for. Like, let's figure out if this is the thing that you actually want. What is the ask? You are seeing more and more brands do this. Bose does this, and some other brands, which I think is a great idea. They hire agencies just for ideas. They're like, we don't even know what we're going to make. We just want you to bring us 5 big ass ideas. Like, just no brief, no anything, and that is brave. That's what everyone needs, because then they could see how things are, fitting into the rest of their ecosystem. But even CMOs, I don't think have enough, enough 10,000 foot vision of their full marketing strategy. They think they do. But it's hard when you are seeing stuff go all over the place. I mean, now you're even seeing agencies. I think today it was announced there was an agency that's going to help one of its clients find a new CMO. I love that, because they know what it actually is needed. They're not getting someone coming in who has a point of view that isn't in line with everything else. Yeah.
You talked about how they're not being even, when I first asked you that question, it's like, what's wrong with it? You're like, there just isn't any. There are some brands, though, that have pushed the envelope and have failed miserably. And I think of Jaguar being one recently. It's like, they really pushed the envelope. They really went, that was creative. It was very creative. It was very different from anything else in car commercials, etc. Didn't work out for them. But then you talked about this idea. It's like, okay, well, Bose is saying, give us 5 great ideas and let's figure this out. How do we become more creative as teams? And I'll tell you, one of the things that I think that I see an issue with in creativity is, you've got back-to-back meetings and you've got this 15-minute block. He's like, great, that's the 15 minutes I'm going to be creative. It just doesn't work that way. You can't schedule creativity to be within 15-minute time frame. But I think sometimes we're just overly busy and we can't get creative. But let's just go back to this Jaguar issue. What did they not do that they could have done? Like, how would you approach this differently to still come up with something wildly creative that would have performed?
In my mind, it's sort of like Jaguar, instead of doing the thing where they're like, someone bring us all these ideas, right? They said, we think that we have a stale brand And we think we need to rebrand because of XYZ reasons, right? Maybe they were told that by a rebranding agency and not but that doesn't ladder up when you are a legacy brand. Isn't that the number one rule? You don't shit all over your legacy, and especially making change. There's other changes you can make that would have solved the same problems that they were trying to solve and be, more, have more equity, have more audience, be more approachable as a brand. There are other things they could have done other than changing, flushing their whole brand down the toilet and taking away everything that gave it value. And yeah, if they had done the thing that Bose does and gotten a bunch of big ideas, somebody could have pitched that. And then they would have, somebody smart would have been no, it's not that it's a terrible idea. It's that there's other ways to make those adjustments than we just have to do something completely different. I mean, I appreciate their bravery, but in my mind, there's a lot of people that were going and shaking their heads, that were not raising their hands, saying this is a terrible idea.
That was a go big or go home moment. And unfortunately, it wasn't the right one. But
I think a lot of the reason that creatives don't have, it's not just time, it's exposure. When creatives are so busy at these, bigger shops that they can only sustain themselves if they have 15,000 clients and everyone is working at 200% capacity. How are they having time to be exposed to new artists or new campaigns or new directors that take different approaches? How are they able to see things differently that sparks an idea for them to do something else? And that is what, a lot of these smaller agencies are able to do and take the time to do. I kind of say the same thing with a brand of taking the time to build slow and not try and be huge. I think agencies are the same way. Stay to be what you need, small or medium or whatever as you need. But if you are getting so big that you can no longer function the primary service of innovative creative, then move out of the way for people who can. And that's fine. I'm just I have been in that position so many times working with holding companies and agencies that the more that they are ingrained into that machine, the lower the work goes. And it's not that they don't have very well-meaning people within it. It just gets harder. There's more red tape. The process is longer. And, they're just being judged at the end of the day by their P&L, which what does it matter if you're hiring outside freelancers or outside experts in a certain thing to do that thing versus having if it's the same cost or in the long run it's actually cheaper and you're getting better work. Why does it matter just because it makes your P&L look better?
Sure.
I will never understand it. So that's a lot of the creative breakdown, in my opinion.
Okay. And you're hinting at the flip side of this, of going ahead and being creative. The flip side is death by committee. And how do we protect an idea from getting watered down then too?
A lot of it comes back to what I was saying earlier, as far as being able to have the clearest vision of what your idea is. Breaking it down to that one box or one still. If you were to make one poster of what this idea is, what is it, whether it's a sentence or that's what I love about translating campaigns into out of home marketing or into things like that, is because they have to actually think, well, is this the best version of this idea? And a lot of times you'll see creatives have an idea, and as they start to try to script that into something, they very quickly realize there's not anything there. There's not, a substance there. One way I see in us being able to help things not get diluted or changed is to just get on the same page too, which I think the rise of AI is going to help a lot with. I think having,
for sure,
I'm not concerned about production fully going away because everything's going to be AI and fake. There's going to be certain assets that, they can save money on creating that way so they can put more money into other things, hopefully. But I think in the long run, it's going to help everyone's have the same vision. And yes, this is what we're agreeing on. Let's all hold hands on jump off this cliff together, which will allow for more trust, allow for better communication. And I think it's knowing able to sell the argument in of why you don't need something. Why don't do this? Why we do this? Why, when you're getting pushback on best practices, well, this needs to be outside of that. This needs to be different. Unfortunately, the amount of time where everything is just loved at the beginning, right? Everyone loves everything. It's when you're on that like fifth yard line and you're trying to deliver, something that people get scared. People get, and at the same time, you're just tired. You're like, fine, whatever, I'll give it to you. And I think that, getting everyone speaking the same language and aligned on the same vision earlier on just helps a lot with that.
I share your view on AI, and even personally, right, there are some things that my wife and I are working on where it's like the deck or, this built-in bookcase, whatever. And it's like, we can put what we have in our mind in AI, design it a lot easier than what we could actually even design. It's like my scribbles that I would draw on a piece of paper. Now we can go, it's like, oh, that's what you had in mind? That's not at all what I thought we were describing. And so now we're like, oh, okay, we can get to the right idea and the right understanding, like you said, a lot better, a lot more accurately. So that way when we move forward with ripping on a wall, we both have the same idea of what this is going to be.
Yeah. I mean, it's no different than you would discuss with a contractor, or, you want to be able to not only describe it perfectly, but like visualize it so that you're thinking about it right. And there's creatives that have big ideas, but the bigger and bolder the ideas, it's not like there's, stock imagery for a lot of these things haven't been done before. How are you going to make that? So the ability to, make a crazy image so that I know how to make it as production and the clients know what it's going to look like. And then you can build on it. That's going to just allow for more innovation and like less fear and more trust with brands, because they're going to be able to do it. And I think, it's just always that game of telephone where it's like, oh, or is the dress gold or blue? Like people just see things in a different way. And it's hilarious. Like it's crazy to me, but it's also it's amazing how, if you think about why people see things the different ways, even if you presented them an image, you're probably going to want to also have like a write-up next to it, because people think different ways. And I think that's too why, like, I work with a lot of production companies that just don't know how to communicate with agencies or brands, and vice versa, because they're all just speaking a different language. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, or making assumptions, because we don't have the capacity to sit there and like think. And most of the time when you're imagining something, you're not starting from a blank scratch. Right. You're starting with a base of something that you already have built in your head, which is completely different than what someone else has.
Yeah, it's very easy. And like, that's how things get taken out of context, misinterpreted very quickly, very easily. We see that, like you said, even with numbers, something that seems like it's just factual. This isn't even an image. We can look at the same numbers and come up with different conclusions about why those numbers exist the way that they do too. I want to talk about some examples, because I think it's fun to hear about like exact case studies, things like that you've done. What's one project that maybe almost went off the rails, but you were able to save it? Something you're like, this was going down a really interesting path.
I did a project in partnership with Hulu for a new show that they had premiering, where it was the premise of the show was a fortune teller, a palm reader. And so they wanted to do something kind of stunty to help, do some PR and then promote the show. And the idea was to have the machine from Big, the movie Big.
Oh yeah! Wow, with Tom Hanks, right? I'm thinking of okay, right?
Exactly,
okay.
The Zoltar machine.
Yeah.
And so we would build the idea was we build a custom Zoltar machine, but inside it is like, instead of it being that character with the hat, it's the character. It's built just to look like the character of the show. And people would come up, fortunes would come out, and then as fortunes came out, things would happen to them. The fortune would come out talking about flowers, and someone would run by throwing petals on them.
Love it.
And it was a big idea. And I love that. It was up my alley. And not only do you learn everything about 3D molding and, scanning someone's face to make like a perfect model, and what colors of, paint make the skin look like, everything that like what goes into just making the box itself. And then it was bringing in, stunt and improv actors to like work around everyone. And it just became like there was a lot of moving parts that there was, I think we wanted it to end with like a climactic ending of something really special. And we were having trouble casting what that would be, because we're all real people. Most of the time it was just people walking up to it that didn't know what it was, we decided we were going to we had it on the promenade in Santa Monica.
Nice.
And we were there like a full day. I mean, sometimes it's just everything. You think that you can, I'm a huge, like I write a long list of everything that's going to go wrong before I even dive into something. And there's stuff you just don't even think about, right? Like the machine's too big to fit into the holding room that we have reserved. And so the day of the thing, the director gets like hit in the head with it while he's trying like crazy stuff.
Oh,
no. And it's all just a part of it. I mean, that was one where it was just like every other week, it just felt like, what is this problem solving? But we ended up like last minute finding a couple to get engaged. So that was like the ending. That was very climactic.
Really cool.
And then we had PR crews come out, and the stars of the show came out, and they got a huge kick out of the machine and all of that there. So that was really, really fun. And it's kind of that stuff that you don't think about, right? You know, or you add on to. I think we had originally the idea was just that not that anything would happen, just that it would just be like surprising, or that she would be inside the machine.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of every time you find a problem, the best solutions are what push the creative further and make the idea bigger.
I think that's so true in so many things in life where you see this even with D2C brands that are getting started. A lot of times, if you think it through all the way to the end, you have eliminated the magic that's going to be there. You have to think it through enough to understand, like, here's the vague idea of where this is going to end up, but I got to see what happens along the way, and that ends up creating something that you could never have done. I forget who it was, but there was an author. Somebody was asking about, like, how do you make sure that, you know, your characters are really good and like that you do a good job with writing your characters. And I don't remember who said this, but they said basically you write 2 drafts of your book. First, you just write the book, you just let happen what happens. And then the second time through, you write it as if you knew that was what was going to happen. But it's like you weren't even sure what was going to happen the first time through. And I like that approach where it's like sometimes that allows for more creative magic, and then you can come back through and make it seem as if that's what was intended to happen.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference between like a creative producer, like a creative agency producer, and just a line producer, a basic production company sometimes, where the first thing that I'll do when a client or a creative team brings me a new brief is just ask a ton of questions, and they hate it. It's not, I'm not trying to poke holes and shake the tree and see but it's more of, I'm trying to get, like, I know what they think the idea is, but I'm trying to figure out what it actually is. What's going to withstand like client scrutiny and production and all of this stuff, to where in the end, we're still all getting to the same place.
Yeah. Tell me about the Monogram project. What did you learn about creative under pressure?
Well, that was one where it took several years, because that particular one, we were renovating Marcus Samuelson's kitchen and his new home in Sag Harbor in partnership with Monogram to tell like a bigger story about him there and customizing kitchens and building a kitchen on an island that has to be very specific during a renovation during COVID. That became its own thing. I learned more about construction than I ever cared to learn. And then it really just came down to, it took so long to get the kitchen made that we had a very, very, very small window to actually shoot like the end. We wanted to shoot the end like in the spring or the fall, and it ended up being like January in Sag Harbor. Lovely.
Sure.
Don't recommend. And you're really just trying to like tell the most like interesting story, from like, I'm at Home Goods when they're going to open, because I'm also the set decorator for this particular one, just because there was no furniture in this house. They had not been given enough time to actually move in.
Wow.
So we had to stage the whole house as though they already lived there. But there's like one store on the island. It was fun. It was more like, I like when you get to do something that feels scrappy because you're all involved.
Totally. Yep.
But it's really, at the end, you're shooting, with an amazing director, an amazing team, and it just looks rich and beautiful. And I think that's why like it connected. You know, I'm like sitting on the like on the floor in the corner holding a boom. Like it was one of those really fun productions, and it's a great brand. And I've done a couple projects with Marcus. He's great.
Do you have a behind the scenes photo of you in the corner holding the boom?
I think there's one of us all in the basement,
Sure.
And it's like freezing cold. We're in the basement on the final night, but
So
the
good.
final night of the final, it was 3 episodes, and we shot the dinner episode last. And as soon as we wrapped, everyone just went, we were just eating this amazing food that Marcus and his team had made. And we just had like a party all night. And he was like, and he ended up keeping most of what we got he's like, oh, you've decorated my home now. Thank you.
That's great. Hey, I'm getting a phone call. It's it's Ice Cube. I understand that you actually at one point in time did have Ice Cube in your contact list. I got to know a little bit more about the story here. How do you know Ice Cube?
I don't know Ice Cube.
Okay.
One of my first jobs in the film industry, when I was deciding if I was going to develop long form film, I was working for a company called Melee Entertainment, who was started by Brian Turner of Priority Records fame. I'm not sure if you're aware. He has a fascinating backstory. He wanted to have a label, and he couldn't find anyone. Like he just couldn't find anyone that wanted to sign this new label that no one knew. And he turned on his TV one day and saw, do you remember the California Raisins commercial?
Yeah, where they're dancing and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was commissioned by like the state of California, and no one had hired that band to make albums. So he had this idea: I'm going to make the California Raisin albums. No one had licensed them for that, so he did that, and they were huge hits. And then that gave his like record label the money to basically be able to sign NWA and everyone from there. So he was very influential in NWA and Ice Cube and a lot of that music, part of the music industry growing. But it all came from him having like what one would think is kind of a dumb idea, but not. It's genius.
It is.
What's funny to me now is no one would ever not think about that now. You would like the first thing you would do is get the music rights now, but at the time that wasn't a thing.
Hey babe, I'm gonna make a record album about raisins. I can see my wife being like,
it was just the characters, because they hadn't licensed them as characters, right?
Sure.
Like their own separate thing. They just made this commercial, and it was just hired studio band guys, and he went and like made his first millions. His first platinum record was that.
That's so good.
And I did not know who he was when I started working there. He had started this film production company. They had just done the film You Got Served, and it was doing a lot of development deals with the music industry after he'd sold the label to Atlantic. And one day he asked me, can you call Ice Cube? Get Ice Cube on the phone for me, and I'm very new at making phone calls for industry legends at this point. And sure. I pull up the Rolodex where all the numbers are, and it says, Ice Cube. And then it says like Philip Hollowshay or like whatever, like his real name. And I have this panic breakdown of, how do you ask for someone whose name, like, do you ask for Ice Cube? Because I was also very like polite. There's not a Mr. Do I say Mr. Ice Cube? Mr. Cube?
Sure.
Like I panicked. Luckily, no one answered the phone.
Oh man.
No, and before that, I was working for Pauly Shore as his intern at the Comedy Store, so I had a lot less glamorous like interactions there, where I wasn't worried about offending, rap moguls.
Sure. So what did you like? I mean, you said nobody answered. Did you leave a voicemail? Like, what did you go with? What did you choose? Hey, Mr. Cube, this is.
No, I said Ice Cube. I just went Ice Cube.
Yeah.
It's like, that feels like you
Did you throw a yo in there? Yo, Ice Cube. No. This is Danny. No, nothing.
Like, excuse me. This is just Brian Turner calling for Ice Cube, leaving a message.
Pardon me.
Pardon me. And I got better at it as I was going, but it was definitely like a world I was not used to. Especially this very unassuming man that, I took the job with, not realizing who he was in any of that history. It's fascinating.
That's really good. Okay, so you've done a lot of really big things, fun things. Out of all of the campaigns that you've put together, what's one that to you feels like the most magical one? The one that you're like, this one just wow.
I did. I worked on the See the Real Me campaign for Clean and Clear back in. It was a long time ago. And the primary purpose was the idea that young girls don't feel seen. Young girls feel like they have to pretend to be something else, and there wasn't. Social media was really not a thing. You had maybe Facebook, but it wasn't what it is now.
Right.
I think there was Vine. It just started at the time, but there wasn't this place for, we're just going to hire like these teens, these teen influencers. So we cast real women, real young girls from all over the country with real stories. We researched them. We found them. Like we told like a transgender story and a dancing story and like just these real girls and, shot with them for a couple days, seemingly ordinary, right? Sometimes they'd be like, I don't think I have a cool story. And then you tell an amazing story, how we all have that capability to be amazing and to see ourselves as amazing. And I loved doing that so much, just being inspired, but also like the finding of the stories and then getting to who these girls are, where I feel like you just can't do that now. Like people wouldn't even think like that. There's not an audience there built in. So why would we take the time? I mean, and that's a campaign that takes 3 years to do. And I really loved doing that one. And I had a similar one with Wells Fargo where it was a I think a 6-episode series with Wells Fargo where we had business experts at a different small business all over the country, basically making over their business, giving them small business advice, giving them like helping them improve things from like a small gym in San Francisco to a Hmong grocery store outside of St. Paul. And it was like a full, very long production, but it was really, I think like it was the beginning of branded longer form content and reality based of that. And I think mainly I wish I could go back and just reshoot that with the technology that we have now, like with the cameras that we have now.
There's something to be said about being able to tell like the everyday stories, right? Where they're bigger than what a lot of people realize. And I think that's where we as human beings, we relate to them so well because we have stories like that too. We're not necessarily influencers talking about those stories, but we have stories and we look at these other people and it's like, hey, that's me right there telling this story, right?
Yeah. And I don't think having the one sentence pop up at the bottom that's like, this is a real customer while you're just, shooting people on a background, spitting out the script that you've written for them. That is not the same thing.
Yeah.
And in a lot of times you can do the same thing. You can do it the right way, the deeper connection way, like for a similar budget. It's just about taking the time and actually thinking about it.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about your personal story, who is Dani Dufresne. You're a founder, you're a mom of 2, you're a creative. How do you protect space for yourself?
I think space is a very important word. That means a ton of things. I think as you get older, as you become a founder and you're doing more, I remember working for Brian or working on my first very like assistant jobs and being like, he can't make this phone call or he doesn't know how to like book his own trip or just things that felt so like ridiculous that I would be doing for another person at the time that I completely get now because there's only so much space in your brain. And when you have a certain goal or you have like this is all I need to focus on right now, or this is what I can spend my energy and time on, you have to get rid of that other stuff. That stuff falls away. And that doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a forgetful person or anything. It's more of having focus and allowing yourself the space to know what's important and what's not. And I think, a lot of times being Gen 1 of like BlackBerry assistants did not help me in my like lack of boundaries when it comes to work. And do you remember being able to leave your desktop at your office and go home?
No, because I started off with BlackBerries too. So like, it just pretty much.
It was like my second job. I had a BlackBerry and they knew how to use it. And that is not a good source of your energy just because, you can solve the problem in the morning and focus on what you need to focus on now. You can do, I think, like seeing it as a precious commodity that is limited, is, how I kind of think of space, and space can't be created without moving something else out of it.
Yeah. You talk about what's important and being able to recognize what is. It's, I think, one of the hardest things for CEOs as a general rule to learn, especially if you're a startup CEO, because, there was a big paper that went around a while about high agency, right? If you're a high agency person, and to a point, a lot of founders are high agency people. We could do all of the things, right? It's like, we're willing to do this and this and this and this, and I will solve it. I will figure out the problem. But to your point, as you continue to mature and you have more people on your team and things like that, there are certain things that it's like, I can do these things, but if I continue to do those things, then I can't do these other things now because I don't have the time to do the things that are really important. And that's not to the benefit of the rest of your team, to your clients, to everybody.
You need to delegate for the purposes of not only lightening your load so that you have more to focus on those other things, but also to teach. If your power doesn't come from being the person that does everything. Right. That just makes you more vulnerable to people like taking advantage of you. I think that it's more about saying, like, I can do all of these things. I can juggle all the things, right? You're doing all the things. Then you have one kid. You're like, okay, I'm still juggling. I'm good. And then I had the second kid. I'm like, I'm using my feet now. I don't really know how I'm keeping all the balls in the air. And you're going, but it's because you're just having to like let people go. You know what? I don't read my email. I don't read my email. If you are on my team, if you ask me if I have read your email, I have not read your email. The purpose of having a team is that you tell me what the emails say, because I'm like, you're going. My time is not best spent sitting in front of my computer doing this long list of stuff. It's better spent doing this stuff, and I've done all the AI hacks that I can find to try to like help. And I think it's finding good people, but at the same time, they only learn by doing all of those things for you and realizing what the information is and distilling the information. And I think that it's, with part of that too, is the way that I was saying earlier with like social media and all media being just too much, we're all overloaded.
Totally.
The places where I get messages, it's like 16 different applications and things, and where pop-up messages here that I just stopped. Like, it used to be that if you wanted to get a hold of me, you Slacked me. And now I feel like even those things are like, I'm treating everything the way I treat like mail in my mailbox, and I just throw it into a pile and I never look at it, because we are just overloaded and you have to protect your space sometimes. And I think that's okay. You just have to kind of build the tools to support however it is you want to work, because that's not what CEO brain is anyway. CEO brain is like, I need this done. And like, don't like, here's why, and having that vision, being able to go towards it. And you can't let anything else weigh you down. You don't, it's energy can't be created. New energy can't be created.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that you even called out too, that you have to set the right expectations for people too. So set that side of time aside, set the right expectations. That way people know, no, I'm not going to check the email. That's not how I'm going to function. I need to save that space and time for this other thing.
And being okay with that not being realistic, right? Like,
sure.
Between 5 and 8, when I get, on the weekdays when I get the kids and we're doing dinner and all the stuff, like, there's no reason for me to have my laptop up or be on my phone. It's not life or death. It's not. And when you do it because you think it's what someone expects of you, then you're also telling them that your time can be wasted and your time isn't valuable. That they can do whatever they want with it. And I think like that is been a long, hard lesson that I've had to kind of like teach myself. But it's protective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's a quote that you live by?
Never make any decision out of fear.
Why?
Because what's the worst that could happen? Like, you can answer that same question from a fear side, and all you're doing is creating that reality versus creating a positive reality. And I think it's wasted energy in the long run. There is no good choice or bad choice. There's luck or no luck. And it's not right or wrong. If something fails because you weren't lucky, it doesn't mean it was a wrong choice or a bad choice. It's just the way that it happened. And it doesn't break down to like emotion. And I think fear is an emotion that was created for a certain purpose, but because we're not being chased by animals in the woods anymore, it gets used, in a lot of other ways. And I think you can feel that feeling, and know that it's probably telling you something good too, right? Like, it's scary because this is an uncomfortable space for me to be in, but I know that like good things come when you go through uncomfortable places. And so it's more of don't take it from the what's the worst that can happen perspective. It's more of, would I still buy this thing if I wasn't worried about money? Would I go on this trip if I wasn't worried about XYZ? Like, what would you do if you were not worried about an outcome? That will always give you the right answer.
I like that. You talked about even luck playing a role in this, and it reminds me of a book called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. And in it, he talks about this, I think it was a German investor, and he had this massive library of art that was just worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. And they talked about, it's like, well, how did he invest so well into finding this, like, early Picassos, Rembrandts, whatever. It's like just finding all of these really good pieces. And it turns out that it's not that he was so good at picking the right pieces to buy or the right artists that he just had so many pieces. Only 1% of his art collection was worth anything. The other 99% wasn't. It's just the idea that it's like, sometimes luck is, kind of to your point, a lot of what we study as people who are successful, it was just making the right decisions over and over and over and over and over again. And eventually one of those ends up working out. And that's when it's like, oh, how lucky you are. And it's like, well,
or not abandoning the right decision when you don't think it's showing you the answer soon enough. I think that's, sticking with it. And, you often hear, the actor that's like, I wanted to give up. And then now I'm, in my 60s and I'm this huge famous actor. Like, that happens a lot. Like, it's more about like perseverance, that if there's an idea or a thought or something that is a fire in you that like you just have the desire to do this idea will not die. There's a reason for that. And you can always convince yourself of a million reasons why something's not going to work out. And I think when you're younger, it's easier to take risks because you have less to risk. But at the same time, it's, you only live the one life. So you can make full pivots and changes at any time. And I like that. I think it's no different than like compound interest in investing, right? It's just
very much,
you're not going to look at your account one day and see a huge change, 3 weeks later. It's about making the same decision and sticking with it all the way through.
Something that you have told me that I believe you have dedicated a significant amount of your brain power towards is quoting every episode of West Wing. That you have a remarkable ability to quote West Wing.
I have seen every episode of The West Wing multiple times. It's typically something that I watch. It's like always in the background at least once or twice a year. It's just sort of like my warm, cuddly blanket. And now that you say that, I'm not going to be able to think of a single quote.
I'm not asking you to quote it. Yeah, you can't quote it on spot. But like, why?
I love it. I think that, I didn't really get into it when it was first out. I ended up having a friend who neither of us could afford cable, but he had all of the VHS of The West Wing.
I love the VHS. Like, not even DVDs, you're saying VHS.
VHS tapes, and we would just watch them all. And I now, luckily, thank you HBO, I can very easily watch them all on my, on my TV. But I recently was at a friend's house, or a producer that works for me, and she worked for me for like 5 years. And she was out of town and let me use her New York apartment. And I was like looking for something. I think I was looking for coffee filters or something. And I found this, like, it was season 2. It was like every script from season 2 of The West Wing in this book. And I was like, how does she not tell me that she has this? Like, and then my husband was flipping and I was like, yep. And then I would say what the next line was, whatever it was going to be, because it's just so good.
Wow. That's so good. I love that. I love when you find something that you can connect with. It's for me, that's Psych. And so I'm that much of a nerd that I even have the Psych phone case where I've probably seen that 4 times. But Dani, it has been a lot of fun talking to you, learning from you, learning about you. If people wanted to work with you, if they wanted to follow you, what is the best way for them to get in touch?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Dani Dufresne, or they can check out our website at Aux.co. And you can join our newsletter there as well and be up to date on all of the latest and greatest. But also feel free to email me anytime at dani@Aux.co, and I'll give you a ring back.
And that is spelled AUX, Ox, just for those who are listening and not seeing that.
AUX, like auxiliary cable, like we just plug right in.
I love that. Well, again, it's been very nice talking to you. I appreciate your time, appreciate your wisdom, sharing that with us today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you everyone for listening. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for listening to the Up Arrow podcast with William Harris. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.